Space. I feel like Rod Serling being your host for Hyperconnected Space and what reality is reality. But anyway, we're going to have a very easy, natural kind of conversation with three guys who are really, really doing it. They sort of come to the same place from different backgrounds, and so I will introduce them. I'll start at that end with Alan Schulman, and he was working at a big traditional agency for many years in Chicago. I guess that's what George Parker calls the BDAs, the big dumb agencies. He then went to the branding side, he then went to the design side, and now he is at digital with, your company is? UDIG, which is Digital Innovation Group. And then we have Mike Manello, and I think what's amazing is that he was one of the original co-producers of the Blair Witch Project. And what I always thought about the Blair Witch Project in terms of social media was that it was sort of the Apple 1984 for the internet. It revolutionized the way we looked at social media and interactive advertising, and it generated, copycats, but nothing ever as successful, really. So he went from there to directing commercials and then working with Steve Wax at
Campfire.
Campfire, right. I keep calling it Steve Wax. And so he's the chief creative officer at Campfire. And by the way, Alan is the chairman and chief creative officer at UDIG. Now we have Gaston Legor-Buru.
Very good.
Is that good? And he's worldwide chief creative officer at Sapient Nitro. And this is really interesting because Sapient Nitro is like the perfect marriage of the I'm sorry, I'm getting a phone call. Of the technological side. Let me just turn this off. I'll sit on it. Too many marimbas at one time. Okay. Of the technological side and the creative side, he originated, the first company that you sold to Sapient was
PGI.
PGI, which is the largest interactive agency, an independent interactive agency in the country. Sold it to Sapient, and then when Nitro came along, they were the creative end, and now you like to talk about idea engineers, so that there isn't that separation. Okay, so I'll start out today with a shameless plug for my agency, Goodby, Silverstein & Partners, because Jeff Goodby always says that the business has changed more in the last 5 years than it had in the previous 25 years. Pretty much everybody would agree with that. To the point where we don't know what advertising is, what an agency is, what a campaign looks like or is, how people interact with each other. It's all being reformed as we speak. So I thought that would be a good place for our panelists to jump in. And maybe what's the biggest problem in terms of dealing with all this change and where we are now?
Well, I think you touched on it. I mean, we get into these violent debates about whether we should even use the word agency. It's a melting pot of technologists and storytellers and cultural junkie geniuses and very different.
Curators and
curators and all this.
Yeah.
So it's this. It's a think tank. It's a melting pot, and I think ideas are informed and can come from anywhere. And we have to think much more expansively. But we really get into this conversation about, are we consultants? Are we an agency? Are we a technology company? What are the bits that you take from Madison Avenue? What are the goodness and the craft of advertising and storytelling that you need to leverage today? And then what are the things that you discard? And it's a big debate that we deal with every day.
And Mike?
Yeah, I think keying off that, I think one of the biggest challenges is taking a culture of advertising I think we've mostly aligned ourselves with storytelling and figuring out now that it's really about thinking experientially and how do we create experiences that give people our stories to tell, because it's everybody says content, I think, is the currency of social media, and I think it's actually stories, because when we have a story to tell, that's when we go and tell our friends. And so it's about how do you give people those stories rather than try to push your story out.
Right, and have them tell your stories or have them experience your
Right.
story. Whereas, Alan, you're all about content creation, right? I mean,
I don't know that
brand content?
Yeah, yeah, indeed. I don't know that I'm all about it, but I think the biggest change has been the velocity. You know, the web brought us a different way to tell stories, a nonlinear way to tell stories, not in a 30-second unit. So, in that, combined with what I would call the velocity of technology, took away time and space from us to create campaigns and then deploy them, and it took away time and space from the marketers to, you know, plan and roll out a product. That can be seen as a problem, or it can be seen as an opportunity, depending on how ready you are to embrace, you know, the velocity of technological change.
Right. Before we were saying that, you know, Mike was saying that the internet is like jazz, and actually Alan is a jazz guitarist. Because sometimes you just can't scat and riff, right? You need some time to work. How do you deal with that?
Well, it's kind of like, you know, creativity on demand, right? Only now we've got, you know, new tools to do that on demand with, and they require different skill sets than we used to have.
Right. Okay. So let's get into this. What is the skill set that, you know, okay, got to use the name Don Draper. If Don Draper, you know, were still alive and in this room, that he can handle the whiskey and the women, obviously, but what would be completely foreign to him that he had to learn?
I think writing. I mean, I think that, you know, if you look at, you know, Mad Men episode, it's all about having that one line, you know, that one thing that sort of distills it down to, you know, the essence of whatever emotional connection you want to make to a brand. And you know, I talk to writers, particularly creative folks that come from a writing background, that we don't write speeches, we write dialogue, where you know, it's not this "I have a dream" speech that you crafted every word, that you spend a lot of time, you know, to test and get that, because at any point in time in that "I have a dream" speech, someone from the audience will raise their hand and say, "Well, what about this?" And now you have to riff. So we write dialogue, we create experiences, and you have to be, you know, quick-witted and fast on your feet. It's a very different skill set, I think.
And Mike?
Yeah, well, I also think that, you know, in that era, it was about brilliantly taking complex ideas and feelings and emotions and distilling them into 30 seconds or a print ad. And I think we still have to do that. But I think on the back end now, everything is so much more complex, because we have to think about not just the meaning of each piece of content or each platform we're playing on, but the meaning that's created as people bounce between them. And that requires very complex thinking on the back end. It still needs to be simple for the people who are experiencing it.
I also think, I don't know that Don Draper would know what to do with a technologist in his office, right? So
Right.
I think, you know, and Bob Greenberg has written about this. I mean, I think that the major change that we've seen, large agency or digital agency, is we now have a technologist as part of the creative team. So Bill Bernbach was about, you know, one writer, one art director. And then, you know, Clement Mock, the founder of Sapient, came along and, you know, started to talk about what happens when you add a technologist to that team. And I think, you know, that's the big, from a creative team standpoint. We're now, you know, the technologists aren't downstream at the end of the process. We've brought them into the ideation process at the head end.
Obviously, planning came in the 80s, but now, you know, the strategic part of it, whatever you're going to call it, is part of the technologist, and it's all wedded to before you even get the nugget of creative.
That's right.
So the other problem, in addition to how complex it's getting, is that many times in your agencies, you're working with larger agencies who are also working with other media companies who are and the brand itself is sort of like a polygamist in that they have like 17 wives and they all want sister wives and they all treat them well, but they're still dating while they even have the 17 agency sister wives. How do you deal with all that?
I think that, you know, the whole tabletop dynamic of having lots of agencies around a table with one central integrator, you know, is a real challenge for any, you know, ask any A&A member and they'll tell you that's a very big hurdle to cross. But I think the bigger issue is how do you go from a campaign mindset to a content platform mindset, right? Because I don't think we're in the campaign business anymore. At least I think the smart marketers and smart agencies are looking for brand idea platforms that, you know, are content platforms that you can iterate around digitally, or you can iterate around them in traditional media, and not, you know, be so obsessed about who owns what piece of the marketing continuum, but do we have a platform? Is there a big idea attached to it? And can we iterate around that platform no matter who's at the table?
Right, and I guess everybody's talking about the idea and the content platform and storytelling. Mike, you want to talk about, you know, interaction with other agencies and learning how to share, you know, past kindergarten?
Yeah, it's not easy. I mean, we're project based and we're 20 people, so we tend to be very small. We tend to get hired by a client to do a very specific task. You know, launch something, or usually change perception, and often we find ourselves kind of playing alone, where we just have to kind of come up with the idea, and we think across all platforms. Doesn't matter whether it's something on TV or on the internet or whatever. We just kind of come up with the idea, and oftentimes we'll then be brought in after the idea to work with partner agencies, and usually they'll be like, if they have a live event agency, for example, then we'll kind of go in and partner. And I think for us, the trick has been to make sure that we leave enough space within ideas for other agencies to be creative, that it's not so prescriptive as like, this is what we need done, but rather, here's a space, and here's the space we're playing in, so that when they come in and interact, this doesn't feel significantly different than when they're working directly with their clients.
And I guess the problem is people have different ideas of what ideas are. Gaston, did you want to talk about that?
I mean, it is probably the thing that is changing the most for us right now, is that sort of, you know, interagency relationship. Because at some point everyone sort of played their position, but we all recognize that the lines are blurring. I'm a big believer that the concept of a standalone digital agency or traditional agency will not exist, right. Which means we all are pushing into the middle. I mean, we work really well with Goodby on Sprint, for
right.
example, and everyone sort of knows their position, and we work, you know, with Wyden on Coke, but then there's other brands within the Coke portfolio where we do more than, or they do more. So as these things become more and more intertwined, as they should be, it puts a lot of pressure on the client, or the strategy leads. And what I mean by it is there are some brands, some products where your strategy must be digitally centered. And we believe in being sort of digitally centered and traditionally capable, as opposed to the other way around. And I think for some brands, you should think about, you know, sort of rooted in what you do makes sense with some digital extensions, and it will continue to become, you know, blurred. But that's sort of the new normal for us now, is this realization that we should play lead for these brands and these products, and just be a digital support system for a traditional agency, or vice versa.
And where do you see this going? Because obviously every traditional agency now wants to be a digital agency, and every digital agency wants to be a large traditional agency, it seems. Who do you think, where will it end? Who are going to be the successful players? I mean, you all come from the point of view of scrappy digital, I mean, huge but scrappy digital agencies.
I think the younger kids working for us in our businesses don't draw that line. They just come with the skill sets of both traditional and digital. So that's that's our line of this transition that Jeff talked about. We've been making over the last 5 years, right?
So it's an alien distinction.
But yeah, it's going to be in another 2 years. It'll be an alien distinction. I don't know if you guys agree, but
yeah, I mean, I would deliberately, had this formula of a writer that came from traditional background and an art director that came from digital, and make them partners, and that's the only way that you get a connected idea. Right. If not, it's sort of trickle down biased, and we don't have to do that anymore.
Right. I don't really think about technology too much in terms of like a divide there. What I think about is that I know when I talk to other creative people to hire them, what I'm usually looking for is, and I feel like there's two general types that you come across. There's the one that will talk about, when you ask them to talk about their work, they talk about the process of making it. something that happened on a shoot or what they were doing or the technology behind it, or they talk about the thing they're making. And the other type are the people that talk about what happened when they put it out there and the reaction it got and what happened when people kind of interacted with the thing they made. And I think that's the kind of creative that you need to be to survive. And that's what we're looking for. Yeah, the kind that's more interested in the reaction and the attention and the reaction that their work is receiving from people. It's like, I think we're no longer, we used to think, I think we used to align ourselves with people like filmmakers and people who make TV, and it used to be kind of storytelling on that sense. And now I think we have to look at different examples, and it'd be like an architect, right, designs a house, but it's not complete until people live in it. Or a building's not complete until people are actually working and living in it. And I think that's how we have to look at when we structure, whether it's platform or...
So I guess the thing is different, as you said, than a campaign, but isn't some of the new, the new cliche is that it's storytelling in whatever delivery system, it works on any delivery system, and you have to be delivery agnostic.
Yeah,
Whatever happened to that?
I think like when we were talking about the internet is like jazz, I mean, I was kind of thinking of it in a narrow way in that, to me, as a novice jazz fan, jazz is a performance medium. It's about, yes, you can listen to a record, but it's really about the live experience, and it's about performance. And I think that the internet, to a certain extent, if you're only using it to house and distribute and spread content, pieces that are set in stone and go out there, I think you're not really understanding what hyperconnectivity is. I think you're using it in a very kind of traditional way. It's like, it's about performance, about our performance, it's about our customers' performance.
Yeah, but be careful of how you use performance, because to most of the people in this audience, performance means performance, of banner units and a lot of things that we've created at scale. And we're not in the scale business, we're in the skill business. We don't like to do the same things twice. And so we've got a lot of publishers and a lot of plumbing out there that's designed to make messaging scale. We even have automated creative studios where you can create your own banners now, and anybody can make them. And that's not idea-based business, and we're in the idea business. So, I think all this plumbing has to, sort of give way to the poetry side of the business, and that's where what we're missing is we're scaling everything to be able to reach people more finitely and measure it and automate it and do everything downstream from the message. What I want to see is, some of this plumbing that the VCs are chasing being used to inform for insights into the business, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, there's this book, Art of Immersion, from Frank Rose, that looks at the distinction, which I think is what you're making, which is, audience to the sort of first generation digital thought about the user. It was some sort of utility, and then you really have to think about a participant as the third evolution of that. Right, and I think that that's the way that we have to look at things. We're the puppet masters that are creating these experiences where people are connecting or being part of something. And at the end of the day, our role is to get consumers to connect with brands, and that's the level of connectivity that we're shooting for.
And I agree, but I think in order to do that, you have to have an understanding, a deep understanding of those people, not the kind of understanding you get from a deck, from quantitative and qualitative research. You actually have to go in and do your own research and get a sense of who the people are.
And I don't know that can come from Facebook, can it?
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, I think that you also have to understand the cultures.
Where do we stand on Facebook and using it as a marketing tool, and where that's going to go? And
yeah, it has its place. It's terrific. It's just that, verbatims from Facebook there might be a great nugget of insight in there that you can use, that a creative team can use. But I wouldn't want to use that as my lone platform for gestating insights to a creative team, for sure. And I don't think it's a surrogate for that. And that's what I think we got to get to is, CMOs don't want to have a data conversation. They want to have an insight conversation.
Well, that's true. I was just going to say, to kick it old school again, obviously television has not lost its strength, and in fact, social media has made television even stronger, because kids who are watching Glee are tweeting and talking to other kids who are watching Glee, and the Super Bowl and all of that, the Emmys, they've all been enlivened by social media.
Yeah.
So, and when you talk about scale, I mean, the money is still in television, right? It's very difficult to make.
Yeah, but it makes you feel, and we haven't yet creatively figured out how to make the web make you feel. we're not all in a lean forward think mode all the time. So I think that, our challenge as creatives is how do we get this new canvas, whether it be mobile or web-based or whatever, to let you feel in the same way that we can storytell in video and as we have in television. And algorithms don't feel, people do, right? So that's still the lean back thing we've got to get to.
Well, that's the poetry you were talking about.
Right. Yeah.
Well, the Zappos case was very interesting because it was like the first, the really interesting mobile. And, people have been talking about the year of mobile since 1997, I think, and somehow it just hasn't happened creatively. Except, I guess it's happening now. What do you think? Yeah.
I think, it goes back to there's a concept of a experience-based differentiation. You can differentiate through message, through an offer, anything like that. I look at things like the ATM, right? So this has nothing to do with a campaign, but there was a bank, and then there was another bank. It had an ATM. You would move your money from here to there because it was a differentiated experience. At some point, if you don't have an ATM, you're not a bank, right? And then came online banking as an experience. So you're either, we find that clients and businesses and brands are either ahead of the curve that are driving differentiation through experiences that happen to leverage technology. And then there are others that are just trying to keep up with, not being a buggy whip company. So I think, mobile as a way to connect with an audience, it's not advertising, and I don't think it will ever be advertising for the sake of just, I have something interesting to say, put it in front of people, and they all happen to have a phone in their hand. That's a silly concept. It's a concept that many people, including a lot of VCs, still hold, onto. But it's not that.
Screen, remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mike, were you going to say something?
No, I think that it's a real struggle because it's not advertising, and I think that brands and clients in particular, but I also think agencies, you struggle with that because you just have to. You're really making a product, I think, nowadays when you're dealing with mobile, unless you're creating something that's.
You mean like an app?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, and then when you make an app, it has to have a reason for existing beyond I want to communicate this message. And I think that's just very, very difficult and very complex. And then I think also that mobile ends up getting siloed, which makes it even more difficult rather than becoming part of something larger.
Alan?
Yeah, I think if you can extend your service offering to mobile, and provide utility for people the way Kraft is doing and others, with mobile applications, I think, that's more of a ECRM kind of a thing than an advertising thing. But, as I look out there across the landscape, I see the closer that the CRM people are moving to the brand people, the better results marketers are getting. So I think that, you still need some of that ability to use the channel as a way to extend services and then, have that complement your advertising. And that's where I think the big win is.
Yeah.
Right. You want to say something else?
I just think everything needs to have a comma. So I think a television spot usually had, a nice little period at the end. It needs to have a comma that then drives you to something that extends that experience and it's as simple as that, right? Is how is this enhance or drive you into a deeper, richer experience, something that's much more immersive.
And how are we using this specific platform in a way that's not replicated everywhere else? Right. Because it can't be about matching luggage anymore with the ads and the spots and everything.
Right. And so I guess companies are no longer, like maybe it was very 2004 to come and say, I want a viral.
Yeah, the minute you say you want a viral, you're dead.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, we both work for insurance companies, right?
That's
so
right.
It's like the first insurance company to have an app that when you got in a car accident, it actually walks you through everything that you needed to do. That was something interesting to talk about.
And
you
that's
could really
useful.
drive experience. But then at some point, every insurance company needs one of those, right? So you don't need to do a TV spot to sort of announce it.
Right, and then every financial company does an app where you figure out what you can retire on.
Right.
Yeah. So. You were talking, Mike, about the sheer complexity of it, and Alan, the speed of it. And how do you, it's like, I think about how The Simpsons is made in Korea, with thousands of people working. That's what we need in the background. the sheer man hours and the sheer, toughness of how do you control that in terms of cost and in terms of profit?
Well, I mean, we're very small. I don't have the issues these guys have. We're 20 people in Tribeca, so
we're small too. So,
but it's tricky. I mean, we're project based, which changes things. I think we do have some clients who kind of come to us continuously, and a few that are ongoing, and it's actually been more of a challenge than in a project base where they're buying something.
You have to staff up and down.
Yeah, I mean, we generally we architect the idea internally, and then depending on what the idea is, we'll bring on freelancers to execute, but overlooking everything. But everything we do is really kind of handmade. It doesn't go into that, oh, there's going to be a TV spot, there's going to be a print ad, there's going to be a mobile app. It's kind of like whatever it is. For Verizon, everything existed mostly physically, and for HBO, it crosses both physical and digital realms.
It's interesting that you use the term handmade when it's digital, because
Yeah.
it's taken everything away from the hand. But I was gonna. Did you want to talk about that? The issue of the staffing thing and the.
Well, I mean, I think that as marketing dollars move, towards a greater digital mix, the dirty little secret is that production costs are much higher. Right?
And profits are much lower. Yeah.
It really is, that case. And I've seen, we have some really large clients that are dealing with this at scale, and I think smaller clients face a bigger challenge, which is, you recognize that you start thinking about the plumbing that it takes to drive these experiences and the investment that you need to create in just managing all of the content and being able to riff and react. You need the sort of equipment to do that, and it's really challenging. I think that few have the resources to establish a platform that can yield some efficiencies, but it's tough.
Yeah, it's extreme challenge for a client if the client doesn't know what's coming, and so I think what we've certainly learned is how to shield the client from a lot of that, as much of it as possible.
But what is the answer if there's really, you can't afford to hire people at a living wage to do that stuff?
Then you don't do it.
Yeah, and if marketing is the growth engine of our clients, then those marketing organizations that have procurement layered onto the growth engine of their companies, which are designed to be efficiency in operations, right? Those are antithetical things. Growth and saving money are antithetical. So any CMO who's able to keep the procurement people out of their business, which are becoming fewer and fewer, this puts us in conversations with procurement officers, even at the creative level, right? As a business owner, I can say it's become extraordinarily difficult to take a blended hourly rate for, a procurement officer. Well, it says, can we have another half of an FTE?
Right.
FTE being a full-time employee. Well, I said, I don't have any half a human beings.
Yeah.
I only have one. So, those kinds of conversations have become a requisite in the business. And, the tough part for us is we literally have to look at opportunities on a case-by-case basis and decide if we can play or we can't.
And you have to make sure you stay at the size where you can still say no.
Right.
That's
Now, you guys are knocking on $1 billion, so I don't know if you have that.
Yeah, well, I mean, so I spend a lot of time thinking about that, right? I mean, thinking about how do you create value through scale in that perspective and still, continue to do really great innovative work. And I think one of the challenges of the space is everything, gets connected, and we create these connected, big ideas or whatever you want to call them, is that we want to do things that have never been done before. We want to do things that are differentiated, but we want to do them at a high level of quality and efficiency, right? And those two things are in odds with each other, right?
It's very hard to innovate
right,
and have it at a high level.
It's the Malcolm Gladwell thing. It takes 10,000 hours to be good at anything, right? So the fact that you're doing it for the first time, and you want it to be, you don't want any surprises, and it's simple. I feel like I'm a pretty handy person, and it's like if I was going to build a birdhouse, I'd do a pretty cool one, and I think the second one would be better, and the fourth one would have surround sound. I guarantee you, right? But so there's this idea of being able to do something really well. So we look at having integrated teams, so teams that are the technologist, the storyteller, the social junkie genius, all of those guys that are coming up with the script, if you will. And then we bring in the special effects people to do special effects, the plumbing people to do plumbing, the media people to do, and really think about, we are very different. I mean, we're 10,000 people. So we leverage, offshoring and centers of excellence, and it's a big sort of complicated web, but it's really leveraging that premise of, someone needs to curate and drive that idea. We need to get paid for that, but the individual components should be done by experts in service of that script, in service of that idea, recognizing that, the costume designer makes a movie better. The special effects person makes the movie better. The cinematographer makes the movie better. And you need to look at ideas, but also craftsmanship as two key ingredients.
Right. Well, that must make it triply hard for the client, who has to manage all, the curation, as you said, across all these platforms and ideas and agencies, and deal with procurement.
Yeah. Well, Mike said it. You have to protect them from all of that. You have to make it completely transparent.
Right. Do you want to talk a little bit about an idea engineer?
Well, I guess it connects to what I was just saying, right? It's like, how do you get the guy that's coding in India, or how do you get the Flash developer or the person that's doing sound design to feel that they are connected? Because what happens is, as we converge, right? So digital becomes traditional, traditional becomes design, becomes technology. All of this stuff is this great mashup. It seems like everybody wants to be in the I came up with the idea bit. And all of the other things are not that exciting anymore, right? Those are things that are being attacked by procurement. So it's like, how do you get every single person to understand the context that they're not breaking rocks, but they're part of building a cathedral, right? So we believe that, getting technology and creative people to work together, we need to unite them under a banner that they get that ideas are cheap unless you can bring them to life, right? I walk down the street all the time and it's like, I came up with that business in 1997, but I didn't do anything about it, right? So you have to really have those skills to be able to bring that to life, and people need to have pride in that. So that's sort of our concept of idea engineering. I think anyone that does anything that's worth mentioning sort of has a little bit of that.
Right. I'm getting a signal that I guess we should go to questions now. This has been terrific, and I hope we have some questions for the panel.
Yep, I can kick us off with one. It's maybe more of a comment than a question. I think there's a lot of talk about Mad Men for a whole bunch of reasons. It helps us kind of get our heads around the industry, especially people outside the industry. One reason I think people wonder whether or not Don Draper could function in today's world is because they're wondering if you guys are relevant in today's world, to be a little bit provocative. I actually think he would be great. You put him in some jeans and untuck his shirt, get him to quit smoking, he might be pretty effective in today's world. The only reason I say that is I think there was a moment on that show where the smoking account, he knew he was going to lose it. And he actually wrote a letter to the New York Times, which was published in the New York Times. And I think, he didn't have a blog, he didn't have email, but he used the New York Times in a way that I think he would have posted that to his blog. And I actually think he would have been really valuable in today's world, just like I think you guys are. So, not really a question, but just kind of a comment. Thank you.
Questions? Well, should we talk a little more amongst ourselves then? Okay.
Okay.
Alan, anything we were missing?
No, I mean, I was just going to say to your comment about, Don Draper, I think it was Albert Lasker who once said, he at Lord and Thomas Advertising way back in the early part of the 20th century, who said to a client, "Sir, we don't represent you to the public. We represent the public to you." And I think that in this day and age, agencies don't have the, I think, having the will to say that to a client and to really understand what motivates. I think Don Draper, as a character, has that unique gift of what's potent to the public, right? And I think he did in that time, and I don't know that he would now. And I don't know with the velocity of change that we're seeing in behavior that any agency or any client has a better knowledge of the public, than any other partner does, right? So I think that's all of our collective challenge. And you as curator of pop culture, boy, it's in your title.
Right. I know.
So good luck with that.
Yeah, yeah. What was the screenwriter William Goldman said about
Right.
Hollywood? No one knows anything. And but I mean, you guys are very, very specialized and experienced in this. But
That said, I mean, I don't consider myself an expert or a futurist or any of that. I mean, I think, it's all, it's sort of a work in progress. What we try to do is use new tools and new canvases to message in different ways. And I think that's still the thing that gets me out of bed, is what I said earlier. I mean, I don't know that algorithms don't feel, people still do. And I think when we put too much of our trust in what automation or the technology side of the business can do to optimize or, any of that stuff, we're getting away from what we're, originally supposed to do.
And I think it's interesting because what you just said ties into a little bit what you were talking about the obsession with something new and has never been done before. And I think that's a real shame, especially as it comes from digital culture, because what happens is usually the shiny new thing is interesting because it's shiny and new, but it rarely has emotional resonance. And I think that's why when something comes out that does have emotional resonance, like the Arcade Fire HTML5 video, everybody goes, ape shit over it, to be frank, because it's because it actually does have emotional resonance. And I think that should actually, that's the golden ring that we should be reaching for, is that emotional connection. And who cares if you're using a platform or a tactic or something that's been done before, if you can actually do it better or actually emotionally connect with the people you're trying to reach.
Right. The Arcade Fire video that he mentioned, it was for HTML5 or something.
Yeah, it was Google and HTML5.
But it had a way of fusing going to Google search and finding your childhood home and getting a picture of what it looks like now, while this guy talked about his own memories and ran along. And it really was so moving.
Yeah, and I think that's, it's why, I mean, I love technology. I think you have to have an understanding of it, but there's always something in the back of my head that makes me go, creative technologist isn't going to save the day, because at the end of the day, it's about making an emotional connection. And you can do that without any technology. You can do that just across the platforms that exist where people are. I'm not saying that's the solution all the time, but I think that is the thing that we should actually be celebrating, not the fancy, shiny new object.
Well, I know one creative guy who, I guess they worked on a campaign for about a year, and it was very successful. It killed everybody. It broke their backs. But he was watching it trending, and there was a cat on a Roomba that kept trending higher than his campaign that they worked on for a year with 1,000 people. So this is what the competition is.
Right.
I've got one more question, since unless anybody else wants to ask. Yesterday we had a group of publishers on the panel. It was a really interesting panel. One of the phrases that they used is, they don't know what's going to work, so they try to fail fast, but they also try to fail cheaply. And I was wondering if that's something that you guys have incorporated as well. Do you work up more ideas? Do you throw more ideas out there to see what's going to stick? Or do you still kind of go with one big concept that you sell into the client and then kind of stick with it along the lines of Barbara's comment about, kind of being outdone by a dancing cat or something like that?
I mean, I think that's a phrase that we do in the creation of digital tactics, right? If we're building a prototype of an app or something, we like to fail fast, fail cheap, because it may not be something that we've shown the client or that they've even seen, but so in an effort to sort of realize it for them so they understand what it is, we iterate. And I think that's a good principle for innovation and iteration in general is, these days, because of the pace at which things are moving, we have to fail cheap and fail fast. Plus, we're a small shop, so we have to do that anyway. But yes, there's clean sheet innovation and there's incremental innovation. And I think that, the faster and cheaper you can fail in either of those buckets, the better.
And I think from a creative standpoint, I think that in almost everything that we do, and I think this should always be the case when you're building something or making something for a client, especially when you're able to do something across platforms, there's always things in there that for us are completely experimental. Have no idea if it's going to work, and the key is to make sure that the cost for those things flies under the radar, and so that it's not a focus of attention. So I think if everything you're doing has that element of that kind of experimental line, where the ceiling the potential is huge, but the damage is minimal, then I think you're always learning from everything you do and applying that to the next thing.
Well, when you said you don't want to do one thing again, you have to then. Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about, the Blair Witch days and the power that emotion had in terms of viral stuff, and how that came about, or was it just because you didn't have money and you had to do it that way?
It was. Yeah, I think it was a combination. I mean, we definitely had no money, but it was because it was before blogs, it was before YouTube, it was before the word social media, and I think for us, we had been working for a year and a half to try to make this movie, and there were elements of the story that were created for the improvisation for the actors, and we were fortunate enough to get a piece of our film, a clip on Bravo, which at the time was a very small cable channel, not the powerhouse that it is.
It was way before the Real Housewives.
Oh, way before, way before.
They were still doing opera.
Yeah,
culture.
it was like mostly repeats and then a couple hours of original programming, that kind of thing. And there was a show called Split Screen, and a clip from our film went on, and people started going online to look for more information. And so I think there was a recognition of, there's people who know about us, so let's try to capture that. And I think that's why originally we had to build a website. And then once those people came in, and we were still a good 8 months from even finishing the film, so we had nothing to market. So it became, well, how do we keep them interested? Well, we'll tell them a story. And so as we started to kind of thread out the story, we noticed that people wanted more, and we left enough holes where people would speculate. And the other action, this is the no money thing, is that as we were busy cutting the film, we would kind of get a new photo or some new piece of something we wanted to release, and we didn't have time to code the website ourselves and put it up. So we just email it to some people to pass amongst themselves as fans, and then they would build fan sites to include that. So we started to realize that if we were giving things away, that would come back to us in a big way. And so for me, the most important learning was after we sold the film in January of '99, we had a lot of people who had been following us since the summer of '98. We got tons of emails from people who, when they read the news that the film had sold and was going to come out, they were jumping up and down because they felt like they were part of that success, and they were a part of that success, and they were a part of that success all the way up to the reason the film opened big was not because it was a big film. We were a tiny distributor, artisan. It was because all those people called the theater managers and said, "We want to see the film," and the theater managers called the regional bookers.
It's that Rage Against the Machine thing, right?
Yeah, and then that booker for AMC was like, "Okay, we're going to shift this Universal film because every theater manager is calling me saying people want this film,"
right.
And that's when I realized kind of what a fan really means, and it's not somebody who presses a like or I got someone to press a like and so they're the fan. It's actually what that small group of people did for us was open up enormous doors.
It's impossible to replicate those conditions, right? Everybody would want to, but it just...
Well, you have to do it with a conversation. You can't just do it with marketing. You have to have a deeper relationship with those people. I mean, we were shooting the special for Sci-Fi Channel, and some of those people actually just got on a bus and showed up at Florida and knocked on our doors. We were in this little house in Orlando, Florida, kind of shooting this stuff. And they showed up and just said, we love this. We can't wait to see the movie. And we just came to Florida just to see where you guys work. It was kind of strange. And so we actually put them in the shots.
Well, these are super fans.
Yeah, they were super fans. And I think that brands have to understand. You have to spend money and time to do that, but the value that those super fans can return to you is incredible, right? I mean, I stop and think about, if you're a CPG and you're trying to get your product on shelves and you do have an army of super fans, how can they actually help you get a product on the shelves?
Right. And whatever happened to webisodes, by the way?
I have no idea.
I don't know. Maybe they died with the microsite. I don't know. But
yeah.
Those things Tony Scott shot in '09 for Dodge Ram Challenge, I thought were just awesome. And I think that to BBDO's credit, I thought it was a great thing. I don't know that it was a hard year for the economy, and I think that as the microsite went, so too did the webisodes.
Oh, I guess we're getting shuffled off the stage.
I'm sorry.
Okay, well, we could go on, but anybody who wants to join us will be in the back of the room watching the next one. Okay, thank you so much for being a great audience, and thank you, panel. You were fantastic.
Thank you.